Kevin Costner's success with Taylor Sheridan's Yellowstone series has relaunched his career and introduced him to a whole new audience. He may have even earned more fans thanks to his television work than any of the films he appeared in during the first half of his career. Is Costner a movie star or a Western guy? As it turns out, he's both. Costner got the chance to satisfy both of his audiences with the underrated 2020 Western thriller Let Him Go. While Let Him Go starts off as a typical Western dad movie, its surprising twist towards ultraviolence suggested that Costner was willing to take classical material and adapt it for the times. Let Him Go makes family tragedy feel real. Let Him Go image via focus features. Based on the acclaimed 2013 novel of the same name by author Larry Watson, Let Him Go takes place in rural Montana during the 1960s. While there aren't any overt references to ongoing political events, Let Him Go implies that the small community that the film centers on is decidedly off the grid. Living beyond the reach of civil society means that this area operates with frontier justice, and that suits the retired Sheriff George Blackledge, Costner, just fine. He is content to look after his wife Margaret, Diane Lane, and care for their ranch, as he does not expect that he will be called back into action anytime soon. George is also recovering from the death of his son in a horsing accident. It's the type of unfortunate, unforeseeable accident that all fathers fear because there was nothing that George could have done to anticipate it. In the early moments of the film, director times.Based does a great job at showing how significantly the tragedy lies over George and Margaret's heads. While some men would have been embittered by the ordeal, George doesn't have anyone that he can direct his anger towards. He can't fault his son or the young widow, Lorana Kaylee Carter, that he left behind. He now just feels generally dispirited and simply goes through his daily routines with little joy. It's a remarkable performance on Costner's part, as he implies that George is dealing with depression without ever explicitly stating it. Any memories of George's son immediately remind him of what he's lost, and as a result, he stayed far away from Lorna. Although George has an affinity for his son's younger bride, he's effectively distanced himself from her after she remarried the rancher Donnie Weeboy, Will Britton. Perhaps claiming that Lorna and Donnie's son, Jimmy, Otto, and Bram Hornung, isn't really his kin, makes it easier for George to move past the tragedy of his son's death. However, he's forcefully thrust back into family politics when Margaret observes Donnie physically abusing both Lorna and Jimmy. Let Him Go has a radical twist. Let Him Go image via focus features. What's beautiful about the first part of Let Him Go is the graceful intimacy of these family encounters. If details about George's profession had never been revealed, Let Him Go wouldn't even feel like a genre movie at all. However, the film takes a dramatic turn in its second half once George and Margaret begin searching for Jimmy. The Weeboy family have now claimed Donnie as one of their own, and isn't willing to give him up simply to appease the Blackledges. Let Him Go opts for a shocking twist when George and Margaret encounter Jimmy's other grandmother, Blanche, Leslie Manville. Blanche is very clearly the de facto leader of her family, and her parenting style couldn't be more different than George's. Blanche forces her other sons, Marvin, Adam Stafford, and Elton Connor McKay, to follow her commands like military orders. The first interaction she shares with George reveals how very different their values are. George doesn't necessarily have pride in his family name, as he only wants his kin to be happy. However, Blanche is willing to fight, and even break the law in order to ensure that Jimmy remains a wee boy for the rest of his life. The implication is enough to terrify both George and Margaret. If they do nothing, Blanche will turn Jimmy into just another one of her drones.